The courtroom was silent, the air thick with anticipation. This wasn't just any legal proceeding, it was the battle of two titans. On one side stood Judge Amy Coney Barrett, the formidable figure whose conservative legal mind had shaped countless decisions on the highest court. Across from her sat Elon Musk, the tech mogul whose business empire stretched from electric cars to space travel, and who had recently begun to delve into the world of law and governance. This wasn't a case of laws being tested. It was a test of intellect, a clash of perspectives that would soon ripple through the media and spark debates for years to come. And the question on everyone's mind was simple: who would come out on top? Judge Barrett had already made her reputation as a sharp and commanding presence. Her quiet but assertive demeanor was enough to rattle even the most seasoned legal minds. But in Elon Musk, she faced something she wasn't quite prepared for. A man who didn't just think outside the box, but had revolutionized entire industries with that very mindset. Musk wasn't just playing by the rules, he was rewriting them. As the court session began, the judge wasted no time. She had a reputation to uphold, and she intended to remind Musk that his innovative ideas had no place in a courtroom unless they were grounded in the law. Barrett's gaze never wavered as she addressed Musk with a sharp tone. "Mr. Musk, while your ventures have changed the world, I must remind you that the law has its own rules, rules that must be respected." Musk, who had always been known for his calm demeanor in the face of adversity, didn't flinch. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes focused. The question was clear. Was Judge Barrett truly prepared for what Musk was about to deliver, or would her attempts at intimidation only fuel the fire? Barrett continued, her words deliberate. "You may be a genius in technology, Mr. Musk, but when it comes to law, you must understand that things are not as flexible as they are in the world of innovation. The law is a structure. It is built on precedence and stability." Musk's lips parted ever so slightly, the beginnings of a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. He could already sense the tension in the room. Barrett was making a calculated move. She was attempting to intimidate him, to assert her control early in the proceedings. But what she hadn't accounted for was Musk's mind, one that didn't bend easily to intimidation. Was this the same man who had risked billions to launch electric cars, rockets, and satellites into space? Did she really believe he could be cowed by a few pointed words in a courtroom? "Judge Barrett," Musk responded calmly, his voice steady but carrying the faintest trace of amusement. "I understand your point, but I think you're overlooking one thing. The law, much like the industries I've worked in, is evolving. It's always changing. You can't stop progress by clinging to precedents." The words hung in the air, the entire room seeming to hold its breath. Musk wasn't being combative, but he was unmistakably challenging Barrett's fundamental view of the law. It wasn't about disrespecting the legal system. It was about questioning whether the legal system could keep up with the pace of change. Barrett, unaccustomed to having her authority questioned so directly, bristled ever so slightly. The subtle shift in her posture spoke volumes. She had expected this, yes, but she hadn't anticipated Musk's unshakable confidence. Her instincts told her to press harder, to assert more control over the conversation. After all, this was her domain. She had the experience, the knowledge, the reputation to put Musk in his place. "Mr. Musk," she began, her tone cold and commanding, "you seem to misunderstand. The law is not designed to bend to the whims of progress. It is meant to be a steady force, to ensure stability and protect society's values. To suggest that we should throw out our legal frameworks in favor of innovation is a dangerous path." Musk's eyes never left her, but now there was no hint of amusement. His response was measured, but it carried a subtle sharpness. "Judge, the law must adapt. You may see it as a structure, but I see it as a tool. And tools, as we both know, are only useful if they are constantly evolving to meet the needs of the moment." The tension between them was palpable now, almost electric. Musk wasn't simply making a legal argument, he was offering a vision of the future, one where the law wasn't bound by tradition, but instead aligned with progress. And it was clear that Judge Barrett, for all her intellectual prowess, wasn't quite ready to let go of the rigid framework she held so dearly. Musk's confidence only seemed to grow, and with every word, the courtroom leaned in closer. This wasn't just a legal case, it was a battle for the future. Would the law remain frozen in time, or would it evolve with the rest of society? Judge Barrett could feel the weight of the moment, the pressure mounting as she realized Musk wasn't backing down. The question now wasn't just about legal interpretation. It was about who would control the conversation in this high-stakes intellectual clash. The air in the courtroom was electric. Judge Coney Barrett's attempt to reassert control was evident, but Elon Musk had made it clear that he wasn't intimidated. For a moment, the room seemed to hold its collective breath, watching this intellectual duel unfold. Barrett leaned forward, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the desk. It was a subtle gesture, one that could have been interpreted as a sign of nervousness, or perhaps just the opposite, a calculated move to regain dominance. Musk, however, remained unfazed. His presence was almost unnerving in its calm. It wasn't arrogance, it was confidence, and it was beginning to challenge Barrett's authority in a way that no one had anticipated. "Mr. Musk," Judge Barrett began again, her voice steady but edged with frustration. "You seem to be suggesting that we should abandon the principles that have governed our legal system for centuries. The rule of law, the foundation of our society. These aren't things to be trifled with. You talk of progress, but what happens when progress undermines the very framework that keeps society intact?" Musk's eyes never wavered. He had heard this argument before, from many others who were content with the status quo, who feared that change would disrupt the order they had spent their entire careers building. But Musk wasn't here to appease that mindset. He was here to make a point that would challenge the very core of what Judge Barrett and others like her believed about the law. "It's not about undermining anything, Judge," Musk replied, his tone calm but resolute. "It's about realizing that the world around us is changing faster than any law can keep up with. The legal system is designed to protect, yes, but it also has to be flexible enough to accommodate new realities. You talk about stability, but what is stability when the rules no longer match the world we live in?" The room grew still as Musk's words landed. He wasn't merely speaking as a businessman, he was speaking as someone who had seen the world change in profound ways. The technological revolution, the advancements in science, the way society itself was evolving, Musk's point was clear. The law had to evolve too. Barrett's expression hardened. She had seen many legal arguments in her time, but none like this. Musk wasn't simply citing precedents, laws, or historical interpretations. He was challenging her worldview. And that, for a judge like Barrett, was something new. She wasn't used to being questioned in this way. In fact, she had never expected anyone to take this kind of stand in her courtroom. "You claim the law should adapt," Barrett said, her voice taking on a more biting edge. "But how can it when people like you, people with influence, think they can simply rewrite the rules whenever it suits them? How do we maintain fairness when those with power dictate the law's direction?" Musk's lips curled into a slight smile, not of mockery, but of realization. This wasn't just about law. It was about power. Barrett's argument was rooted in the assumption that the law was the protector of fairness, but Musk saw it differently. The law, he believed, was often a tool of the powerful to maintain control, not a system that necessarily served justice. "The law isn't a tool to be wielded by the powerful," Musk countered. "It's a tool to serve the people. And right. Now, it's not serving them. It's holding them back." The courtroom was silent once again. The audience could almost feel the shift in the energy. Barrett had made her stand, but Musk's words had pierced the veneer of certainty she had wrapped herself in. His conviction was undeniable, and as the judge looked around the room, she could feel the weight of his argument settling in. Judge Barrett wasn't accustomed to being on the defensive. She had spent years navigating the complexities of the law, always with the certainty that the system was built to be fair. But Musk had introduced a new perspective. A perspective that challenged everything she thought she knew about the legal system's role in society. For the first time since the hearing began, Barrett hesitated. It was a fleeting moment, but it was there. An imperceptible shift in her posture. A brief pause before she opened her mouth to respond. She was calculating her next move, trying to determine if she should press Musk harder, or if it was time to acknowledge the uncomfortable truth that his point had merit. "Mr. Musk," she began, her voice quieter now, "you speak as though the law has failed the people, but it hasn't. The law is the only thing standing between chaos and order. Without it, society crumbles. Do you really want to live in a world where everyone decides what the law should be based on their personal views?" Musk shook his head. Slightly, his expression still calm, but now more pointed. "No, Judge. I want to live in a world where the law evolves to meet the needs of the people. A world where justice isn't a stagnant concept, but something that grows and adapts with society. The law should not be a barrier to progress. It should enable it." It was a stark contrast to Barrett's worldview, and the tension in the room was palpable. The confrontation had escalated from a simple legal discussion to a philosophical debate about the role of the law in modern society. Judge Barrett, ever the master of composure, now faced the uncomfortable reality that Musk was not just an adversary, he was a force of change, and his arguments had the potential to reshape the way the legal system was perceived by the public. As the room simmered in silence, Barrett realized that this battle was no longer just about winning a case. It was about something deeper. About the future of the law itself, and whether it could keep up with the seismic changes happening in the world outside the courtroom. The energy in the courtroom had shifted completely. What had begun as a simple legal discussion had now transformed into a high-stakes ideological battle. Musk's words hung in the air, and the intensity of his argument was undeniable. Judge Barrett, however, wasn't one to give up easily. Her reputation as an unflinching legal authority was at stake, and she wasn't about to let Musk's challenge undermine her position without a fight. Barrett's fingers drummed against the edge of her desk, the sound echoing through the courtroom. She could feel the eyes of everyone in the room on her. The stakes were higher than ever. This wasn't just a debate about law. This was about the future of justice itself. And for all of Musk's confidence, Barrett had the one thing he didn't: experience. She had been tested in the highest courts, and her ability to control the narrative in a legal setting was unparalleled. "Mr. Musk," Barrett began, her voice now carrying a tone of authority that commanded the room's attention. "You talk about the law evolving, but what you're really advocating for is chaos. A system where the law bends and shifts according to the whims of the powerful is not a system that promotes justice. It's a system that creates instability." Musk didn't flinch. He had heard these arguments before, and he knew how to respond. But this time, there was something different in the air. The audience, the lawyers in the room, even the media reporters stationed at the back, were all watching, waiting to see how this confrontation would play out. The room was alive with energy, and it was clear that Musk was no longer just defending his vision of the future. He was challenging the very core of the legal system that Barrett had spent her entire career defending. "Judge," Musk said, his voice calm but resolute, "I'm not advocating for chaos. I'm advocating for adaptability. The law is not some immutable force. It's a set of principles designed to protect the people, yes, but it's also meant to serve them. If the law can't keep up with the changes in society, then it fails, and the people suffer because of it." For a moment, there was silence. Barrett's expression remained unyielding, but the tension was palpable. Musk's words had struck a chord, not just with the courtroom but with Barrett herself. She had always believed in the stability and permanence of the law, but Musk's argument made her question if that very stability might, at times, be the enemy of progress. Barrett cleared her throat, ready to press on. She wasn't going to let Musk off the hook so easily. But how can you be sure that your vision is the right one? You speak of flexibility and progress, but where does it end? If we start bending the law to suit every new trend, every new innovation, where do we draw the line? Who decides what is right? Musk leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath as if contemplating her question. He knew this moment was crucial. He could feel the weight of the argument resting on his shoulders. This wasn't just about winning the case. It was about convincing everyone in the room that the future of the law couldn't be determined by static traditions. "The line is simple, Judge," Musk replied, his voice unwavering. "The law should protect the people and enable their progress. It should be a shield, not a chain. The line is drawn where the law stops serving the people and starts hindering them." There it was, the heart of Musk's argument. He wasn't just a businessman advocating for change in the tech world. He was now positioning himself as a champion for the very people the law was meant to protect. His words weren't just legal jargon. They were a call for a transformation of the system, a plea for a more dynamic approach to justice that could adapt to the fast-moving world around them. The room seemed to shift, and Barrett could sense the change. For the first time in the proceedings, her position didn't feel so invincible. The people who had come to see the court battle were now seeing something much bigger, an ideological struggle that would determine how law would interact with progress in the years to come. Judge Barrett's eyes narrowed slightly as she weighed her next move. She had the experience, the background, and the institutional power behind her. But Musk had something else: vision. And in a courtroom where logic, precedent, and authority had always reigned supreme, Musk's vision was a wild card that no one could predict. "This isn't about serving the people, Mr. Musk," Barrett shot back, her voice filled with conviction. "This is about protecting them. The law's purpose is to maintain order, not to cater to the latest fad. You cannot bend the law to fit every whim, and to suggest otherwise is to invite anarchy." But Musk wasn't finished. He had been in situations like this before. He had faced down criticism from all angles and had still managed to emerge stronger. This was no different. He wasn't just defending his ideas. He was pushing the boundaries of what was possible. "The law doesn't protect the people if it doesn't evolve to meet their needs, Judge," Musk countered, his tone becoming more impassioned. "The people are being left behind by a system that can't keep up with the pace of innovation. And that's where we're headed, into a future where the law no longer serves the people, but stifles their potential." Judge Barrett's grip on the edge of her desk tightened. Musk's words had hit their mark, and she could feel the pressure mounting. This wasn't just an intellectual debate anymore. It was a challenge to the very foundation of what she had spent her career defending. And she knew that every word she spoke now would be scrutinized not just by the room, but by the world. The room grew quieter, the air heavier. The tension was unbearable as the confrontation between these two intellectual giants reached its breaking point. Would Barrett's experience win out, or would Musk's vision for the future prove to be the driving force behind a new era of legal reform? The silence in the courtroom was deafening. It felt as though the entire world had paused, waiting to see which way the scales of justice would tip. Musk had made his case, and Barrett had responded with all the force of her legal training, but the back and forth had reached a fever pitch. It was clear now, this wasn't just a legal dispute. It was a battle of ideologies, a war for the future of justice itself. Barrett's eyes narrowed, her mind racing as she processed Musk's argument. She had spent years cultivating her reputation as an unshakable pillar of the law, a figure who could be relied upon to uphold tradition and stability. But Musk's words had left an impression on her, an uncomfortable one. He wasn't just challenging her legal reasoning. He was questioning the very foundation of the system she had sworn to protect. and she wasn't sure if that was something she could easily dismiss. "You talk about the future, Mr. Musk," Barrett said, her voice tinged with skepticism. "But what you're proposing is an uncharted territory, a world where the law bends, with every new technological breakthrough, every new idea that comes along. Do you really think the law should be so malleable? What happens when that flexibility is abused? When the powerful misuse it to serve their own agendas?" Musk didn't flinch. He had expected this line of questioning. In fact, he had anticipated it. It was the same argument that had been thrown at him countless times before. But he was no stranger to pushing back against conventional wisdom. He had done it with his companies, with his technology, and now he was doing it with the law. "The law," Musk replied, "isn't meant to be a rigid structure. It's meant to serve the people, not the other way around. We're at a crossroads, Judge. We can either stick to the old ways, where everything moves at the speed of bureaucracy, or we can move forward, evolve, and create a system that reflects the world we live in today." For the first time, there was a crack in Barrett's composure. She shifted in her seat, her fingers momentarily still on the desk. Musk's argument was starting to break through the defenses she had carefully built over the years. There was a part of her that couldn't deny it. The world was changing, and the law had to change with it. But Barrett wasn't about to back down now. She had too much at stake, and her reputation as a judge wasn't something she was willing to sacrifice. Her response came swiftly, almost as though she were trying to hold on to the ground she had fought so hard to claim. "I understand your vision, Mr. Musk," she said, her voice firm once again. "But what you fail to realize is that the law exists to protect people from chaos. What you're suggesting is a system where the law constantly adapts, without a stable framework to guide it. That's not progress. That's a recipe for disorder." Musk's gaze never wavered. He wasn't rattled. In fact, he had anticipated this pushback. The law had always been seen as a bastion of stability, a structure that kept everything in place. But Musk had seen firsthand how outdated systems could stifle progress. He knew that something had to give. "No one's suggesting chaos, Judge," Musk said, his voice calm but unwavering. "What I'm suggesting is a law that adapts to the world we're living in, not one that's stuck in the past. If we're going to build a better future, we need a legal system that works for everyone, not just for the people who hold power in the old system." Barrett paused. There it was again, the underlying critique of the power dynamics that had long defined the legal system. Musk wasn't just attacking her position as a judge, he was attacking the system itself, the very structure that had defined her career. But she wasn't ready to concede just yet. The tension in the room was palpable, as the courtroom waited for the next exchange. Barrett had always been able to control the room, but now, for the first time, she was uncertain. This wasn't just an intellectual sparring match, it was a moment that could change the course of her career, and perhaps even the way the law was viewed in the future. "The law must have limits, Mr. Musk," Barrett said, her voice taking on a slightly more defensive tone. "Without limits, we risk losing the very principles that make our society stable. You can't just throw everything into flux and expect things to work out. There must be structure, rules, and above all, authority." Musk leaned forward, his gaze sharp and unyielding. "And what happens when those rules no longer serve the people they were meant to protect? What happens when the law becomes a tool of the powerful, instead of a shield for the powerless? I'm not asking for anarchy, Judge. I'm asking for justice." The words hung in the air. There was no denying that Musk's argument was gaining traction, not just with the public, but with the people in the room. The media, the lawyers, and even the jury members. All of them were quietly observing, their thoughts swirling as they processed Musk's words. Barrett was quiet for a long moment, her mind racing. She knew the law had its flaws, but she had always believed in its fundamental purpose, to protect society from chaos. But now, she was faced with a different reality. Musk's words were forcing her to confront the possibility that the law, as it stood, wasn't as perfect as she had always believed. But the question remained. Was she ready to accept that? Was she ready to let go of everything she had stood for? The room was charged with an electricity that had not been felt before. The battle of wills between Judge Coney Barrett and Elon Musk had reached its zenith, and now the final clash loomed. What had started as a discussion of the law had evolved into something far bigger, an ideological war about the very nature of justice itself. It wasn't just about one decision, one ruling. It was about the future of the system that had governed the nation for centuries. Barrett sat, her fingers steepled before her, her gaze fixed on Musk. The weight of her years on the bench pressed down on her. Experience, wisdom, authority. She had stood before the highest courts, seen the arguments of the brightest minds, and delivered some of the most important rulings in the country's history. But now, she faced a challenger who was unlike anyone she had encountered before. Musk's words had shaken her, but she was a seasoned judge. She would not be cowed by the pressure. "Mr. Musk," she began, her voice measured but tinged with the steel of someone who knew the stakes. "You have spoken about progress, about adaptability, and about a legal system that evolves with the times. But what I see is a vision that puts too much trust in the hands of the few, the powerful. A law that changes with every new technological breakthrough is a law that can be easily manipulated, used to control those who cannot keep up with the changes." Musk sat forward, his posture unwavering. "Judge," he responded, his voice calm but insistent. "It's not about putting power in the hands of the few. It's about creating a system where the law evolves to meet the needs of the many. We cannot continue to rely on a system that was built for a world that no longer exists. The world has changed, and the law must change with it." Barrett's eyes narrowed, and for a moment, there was silence. She knew Musk's argument was persuasive, but she couldn't let go of the conviction that the law was meant to be a protector, not a tool of the powerful. She had seen what happened when laws were bent too far, when they became malleable to the whims of those in charge. She had spent her career ensuring that such things never happened again. But now, sitting in this courtroom, faced with Musk's arguments, she couldn't ignore the growing doubt in her mind. What if Musk was right? What if the law had become too rigid, too inflexible to serve the people it was meant to protect? The tension between them was palpable, and the air in the courtroom seemed to grow heavier with each passing second. The eyes of everyone in the room were locked on this moment, the final turning point in a battle of ideologies that had captivated the nation. "Judge Barrett," Musk said, his voice softening, "the law has to work for the people. We can't keep using it as a barrier to progress. The world moves faster than the law can adapt, and people are left behind. That's what we're fighting against. We need a system that works for everyone, not just the ones who are in power." Barrett's expression softened ever so slightly, but she still held firm. "And you think that system is one where the law constantly shifts, where the rules change to fit the needs of those who have the power to influence them?" "I think it's one where the law adapts to the world we live in," Musk said. "A system that grows with society, one that empowers people to live their lives freely, without fear of a legal system that lags behind." For a moment, Barrett didn't respond. The weight of Musk's words was undeniable. She had always believed that the law was the ultimate force for stability, but now she was faced with the possibility that this very stability might be preventing the kind of progress the world needed. The crowd in the courtroom was on the edge of their seats, waiting to see if the unflappable judge would give ground. Musk had come into this battle prepared for a fight, but it was clear now that he wasn't just trying to win. He was trying to change the very fabric of the legal system. And in this high-stakes game of words, he was forcing Barrett to confront the very system she had sworn to uphold. Finally, Barrett spoke, her voice steady, but now with a hint of something else. something unexpected. "You are right, Mr. Musk," she said. "The law must serve the people, but it also must protect them from the unknown. We cannot allow a legal system to be constantly in flux. Without stability, there can be no justice. Without justice, there can be no freedom." The words hung in the air, the room falling silent. Once again, it was clear that both Musk and Barrett had made their cases. They stood as two intellectual giants, each with their own vision for the future. And while Barrett had not entirely abandoned her stance, she had acknowledged that Musk's vision was not without merit. In the end, it wasn't about who won the argument. It was about the fact that this confrontation had sparked a conversation that was long overdue, a conversation about the future of the law, about progress, and about what kind of system would truly serve the people. Barrett stood, her gavel in hand. "This court is adjourned," she declared, but it was clear that the debate was far from over. Outside the courtroom, the media would be buzzing with the aftermath of this historic clash. Musk's vision of a more flexible legal system had been laid bare, and though Barrett's position had been unwavering, the seeds of change had been planted. As Musk walked out of the courtroom, he could feel the weight of the moment. This was more than just a legal battle. It was the beginning of a new chapter in the fight for justice. And though he had not yet convinced Barrett, he had sparked a movement that would echo throughout the nation for years to come. The courtroom doors closed behind him, but the questions they had raised about the law, about progress, about freedom, would linger, waiting for the next chapter to unfold.